Much-anticipated meeting of the National Economic Council has now ended at the Presidential Villa Abuja with a resolution to consider negotiating a new minimum wage for workers. There were also other interventions that will be introduced to cushion the impact of the full subsidy removal. Some of them is that each state should plan towards implementing a cash transfer program based on the social register of the state. Also, there should be a cash award policy for public servants for 6 months. NEC has also recommended that state governments pay public servants outstanding liabilities, among others. State House correspondent Femi Akonde will be joining us shortly to share updates on the outcome of that much-anticipated meeting. Thanks for joining us on the program. It's 52 days of Bola Tinubu's presidency, and we're monitoring developments in his first 100 days in office. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. You can join the conversation right now on Twitter if you use the hashtag #first100days. Remember to tag at TVC News NG and at Nifemi Oguntoye. Coming up on the show today, we'll continue our discussion on President Tinubu's fuel subsidy palliatives and the new pump price. Joining me later on is the head National Coordinating Center, United Action Front of Civil Society, Olawale Okunoyi, and Executive Director, Center for Rights and Grassroots Initiative, Nelson Ekujimi. Now, President Tinubu has continued his consultation with key players on how to get the economy on sound footing. Yesterday, he and Vice President Kashim Shettima met with the Senate President Godswill Akpabio and governors of Imo, Kwara, Lagos, and Ogun states, including the former governor of Kano State, Abdullahi Ganduje. According to the presidential advisor on special duties, communications and strategy, Dele Alake, the meeting also looked at how to finalize arrangement on the distribution of palliatives in order to cushion the effect of the full subsidy removal. The presidency earlier had proposed the distribution of grains and fertilizers to farmers, also as part of measures to boost food security across the country. State House correspondent Femi Akonde joins me now on the program. Femi, we've waited for weeks after the president gave NEC responsibility to, discuss government intervention in this light. Walk us through what the resolutions are.
Yes, well, Nifemi, like you said, the long-anticipated meeting of the National Economic Council that would roll out the palliative program of the government. But what we are hearing now coming out of the meeting, based on the resolutions reached at NEC, a meeting that comprises state governors, is that the subnationals will be heavily involved now in cushioning the impact of the removal of petrol subsidy on the poorest of the poor. They are expected to come up with a conditional cash transfer program based on the social registers in their states. They are also expected to come up with some kind of a cash award program for civil servants in their state, and also ensure or begin the process of the transition from fossil fuel vehicles to the CNG, the compressed natural gas vehicles, the CNG vehicles, But all of these are just the short-term measures. That of the review of the national minimum wage is a medium and long-term measure by the a recommendation by the National Economic Council. But what this throws up is that a lot of questions about the social register. How many states have social registers? What is the credibility and integrity of these social registers? We also understand that at the NEC meeting, the governors were unanimous in saying that the National Social Register, as we have now, lacks credibility and integrity, because they're asking questions about how it was compiled, which names are on that register, and are these people on the register truly beneficiaries of government interventions over time? This has been a conversation that has been ongoing for a while now, coming from the previous administration into the administration of President Bola Tinubu. But now the governors are coming out to speak up openly against that National Social Register that existed, that was set up in the previous administration. Now the state governors will have to do more in coming up with their own register ensure that it is inclusive, it is robust, it captures the poorest of the poor, the vulnerable, the people in need of these conditional cash transfer that would help cushion the hardship caused by the removal of a petrol subsidy.
This cash transfer at the state level, is it a replica of the initial 8,000 naira to be distributed to 12 million households?
Well, I believe that will be worked out by state governments based on their financial capacity. That is what we are hearing. You know, some states have more resources at their disposal compared to other states. So it will be based on what they can afford, and also that would also have to be ratified again by the National Economic Council. So all states would go and work it out based on their peculiarities. We do not know how much. There is no particular peg to it, but we just know that state governments now would have to be the ones in charge of these conditional cash transfers that is expected to ease the impact of the removal of petrol subsidy.
So when you talk about negotiating a new minimum wage for workers, this conversation began in the early days of this administration when federal government met with labor leaders. I thought that conversation was ongoing before now.
Yes, that conversation is ongoing. You know, it started when the fuel subsidy was removed, when organized labor kicked against it and even threatened to down tools before they came to the negotiating table with the federal government. And one of their demands was a review of the national minimum wage. But now this has escalated to the level of the National Economic Council. They also agree that looking at the current reality in the country, there is a need to review the minimum wage for workers. But you know, reviewing the minimum wage is a complex process. It's not just something that can be done with just mere executive pronouncement or pronouncement by Mr. President. A lot of processes are involved. People will have to come to the table, the organized labor, the government, private sector, the civil society. Everyone will have to come to the table to bring their suggestions and see what works, what is available, what is achievable, what is realistic, before they can now come up with a harmonized minimum wage that will now be implemented. So it's expected to be something that would be a process that would last for a while. Like, you know, it was said at NEC, this is a medium and long-term intervention, not something that will be immediate. But what we are expecting immediately are the conditional cash transfers based on social registers that exist in states. Also, foodstuff will be released from the national grain reserves to the poorest of the poor. Fertilizers will be released to farmers. We already had that announcement, and a whole lot of smaller interventions that would just ensure that the prices of foodstuff, basic foodstuff, are not out of reach of the poor masses. Mifemi.
All right, so we have the resolutions of the National Economic Council. Nigerians are waiting for the implementation and precisely what government will do in the coming days. Femi Akonde live for us at the Presidential Villa, Abuja. After this break, we'll talk more about President Tinubu's palliatives in the aftermath of the removal of fuel subsidy. Stay with us. Now, let's tell you more about what we know has happened after the removal of fuel subsidy. The demand for petrol has dropped by over 35% since the removal of subsidy, according to Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, Farouk Ahmed. The daily PMS truck out has reduced significantly to about 47 million litres per day. That's from 66 million litres per day in May. We also know that 56 oil marketing companies have so far obtained licenses to import PMS. But according to the NMDPRA, only 10 out of the 56 have really shown commitment. 3 of them have already landed cargoes, and they are Prudent Energy, AY Shafa, and Emadeb. But 11 PLC and others are also indicating interest to import in August and September. TVC correspondent Inioluwa went round Lagos to feel the pulse of Nigerians in the aftermath of the increment in the pump price of petrol.
The streets are full of mixed reactions as the increase in the price of fuel has affected the cost of transportation, food items, among many other things. Now, though President Bola Tinubu has assured Nigerians to be patient that the decision to remove fuel subsidy would soon pay off, it still remains tough for many Nigerians to handle. I boarded a bus from 7 Up Toll Gate in Lagos going to Bega to ascertain how much it would cost me. While in the bus, I engaged with some passengers who lament how they have spent more money for transportation and food, hoping the fuel price drops soon.
From Bega to Tollgate, I used to pay 100 naira, but now it is 300 naira to go and 300 naira to come. I am just coming from Bariga and I was charged 500 naira to Bega, which used to be 200 naira before.
Before now 150, 200, now in the carrier. Now we talk saying 500, one carry. This one, before I buy 150, 200. Now, I buy 600.
The driver is not left out as he says what he makes on daily basis is mostly spent on buying petrol.
The thing affects us a lot. Because before now, if I use 1,000 naira for a good come, now it's 3,000 naira.
As we move around the streets of Lagos, we stopped by a filling station where the manager revealed they are also affected as profits are significantly reduced.
The sales has reduced a bit. You understand? Some will buy, some people that have been coming to buy large quantity before, they reduce their quantity.
From Onitsha to this place now, buy fuel at 61,000.
Despite efforts from the federal government to make things bearable for Nigerians, things seem to be getting tough. Now, Nigerians want the government to quickly ease their pains by providing cheap transportation and food items and jettison the proposed hike in electricity tariff. In Niolua Bukwola, TVC News, Lagos.
Let's continue our discussion right now on President Tinubu's full subsidy palliatives on the new pump price of petrol. Head National Coordinating Center, United Action Front of Civil Society, Olawale Okunoye, joins me on the program. Executive Director, Center for Rights and Grassroots Initiative, Nelson Ekujimi, is also here. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We have just about 10 minutes, so let's get to it. What should government be doing differently right now, now that we know where the shoe pinches for each Nigerian? Mr. Okunoye, let's begin with you.
Well, I think that government really have made so much error in imposing and unilateral foisting the fuel price hike. And that is what is causing the present calamity in the country. The people are daily regretting, a whole lot of things about our polity. And I think that we really need to do something. Government really need to rise up to the occasion. It's very important at this point that government rise up in response to the request, yearnings, and demand of the people to go back immediately. Because some of us don't understand what you call deregulation, where NNPCL continues to determine the price of PMS. That is not deregulation. That is monopoly. And I don't know, and that will distort the economy of the country. Government really need to consult. Consultation is inevitable, and it's multi-stakeholders consultation. Government cannot be wise alone. Government shouldn't have foisted in the first instance. Removal, yes. We had said in 2012, subsidy is not the problem, but corruption. The mantra at that time was kill corruption, not subsidy. But to kill corruption, everything about Nigeria is riddled with corruption, given the system that we inherit, particularly beginning from 1998, when military constitution was foisted on the country. And that is still playing out. government needs to look at that. But before we get to that, the first demand we are making as organized civil society is that government should revert back to consultative team of stakeholders.
All right.
And also revert back to that price, the former price, which I think was 167 or so, thereabout. And let us now start it. Because you cannot increase fuel or remove subsidy without alternative intervention.
All right, Mr.
And that is...
Mr. Okunoyi, let me bring in Mr. Ekujimi very quickly. You have mentioned two key things, multi-stakeholder consultation, and then the idea that it seems NNPC Limited is still fixing price. Mr. Ekujimi, how do you react?
Well, thank you very much. I think what has played out in this little conversation we are having this evening is that, some Nigerians are still ignorant of what, fuel subsidy removal connotes. And bearing that in mind, it's as if, the government still has a work to do in educating and sensitizing Nigerians. It's a fact that, majority of Nigerians are agreed that fuel subsidy has to go. From 2012, the issue was not about, whether fuel subsidy didn't exist, but the issue was that it was being mismanaged. And if it had become a recurring decimal, that it hemorrhages the country's economy. So the best thing is for the government to hands off subsidizing, the price of PMS, just like it has done for kerosene and diesel. And we can see the effect today. Diesel and kerosene, went up. Diesel at a point in time was almost about 1,000 naira per liter. But today you can go to the gas station and get diesel for 600 naira or thereabouts. So the issue clearly now is what palliatives is the government putting in place. And one is glad that the National Economic Council has sat down and agreed that these palliatives have to permeate the federal, the states, and the local governments. Those are the three tiers of government that are beneficiaries of the windfall from the fuel subsidy, removal. Don't also forget that, early in the life of this administration, the Debt Management Office warned that incurring more loans, we will portend catastrophe for the economy. And if that be the case, it means that those leakages that have not allowed government, to recoup revenue, to provide the dividends of democracy to the people, which is encapsulated in this subsidy regime, are to go. And nobody is in doubt that fuel subsidy, must go. Today, you can talk about an economy that in July, the states, federal, and the local government are going to, share a federal allocation of almost 2 trillion. The first time in our political and economic history. You also look at how the economy has picked up, but one must admit that things are tough for Nigerians.
Absolutely.
But the most important thing is that that we must all agree that we cannot continue to sustain fuel subsidy. For some
all right, Mr. Ekujimi, talking about the resolutions of the National Economic Council, we now know exactly the direction of this government in that regard, negotiate a new minimum wage for workers, and then the responsibility that states now also have to carry, the burden of planning towards implementing a cash transfer program based on the social register of the states. There are about 6 items on this resolution. And let me just quickly get your thoughts on this, Mr. Okunoyi. The fact that states now have to come up with their own social register, and it seems that the cash transfer program is still very active.
Well, for me, if the foundation be faulty, what can the righteous do? Cash transfer may never work. We have gone through this route before in Nigeria. I mean, just recently, money trader, whatever, and so on and so forth, put in place by Muhammadu Buhari's regime. They never work, no impact, school feeding. And so people will turn it to politicize it, and it will be, what you call favoritism will set in. party politics will set in. Before you know it, it's bastardized. I think that what we need to do is not cash transfer. It's for us to, subsidy itself is not a problem. The problem within the Nigerian subsidy regime is the corruption and mismanagement of that program. And that is what we must deal with. And government can deal with that when it brings stakeholders to the table. Not the way government is running. I expect a democratic government like the Tinubu administration, if it is truly democratic and voted for by the Nigerian peoples, the masses, to be consultative. That is the first thing we learned. And then Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu himself was with us in Nadeko. You know, I mean, what we said were National Democratic Coalition, we're pro-democracy. We must show democratic ethos, democratic, values.
All right.
The government, it says that subsidy is gone, should have consulted, should have brought stakeholders, should have determined who are the stakeholders, the leaders of the people, the organized civil society.
All right.
Labor is just 4%.
All right.
4% of the population.
Let's talk about, very quickly, let's talk about the engagement of states.
Is not consultative enough.
All right.
And so, pardon, what?
Let's talk about the engagement of states on this list. You saw that it would seem that state governments now have a lot of burden to carry. How can people across the 36 states also make their governors accountable in this subsidy regime? Or free subsidy regime?
I've spoken about foundation, and I think the foundation of this entire intervention by government is still faulty. But then, well, maybe the civil society can be a bit more vigilant and alert at that level. But I know for what we know politicians to be, this will be circumvented.
Oh, you don't seem to have so much faith in politicians. I'm afraid we have to go now. So,
not politicians.
But you are a politician yourself too.
No, wait. The system is not the system. The system upon which politicians operate now gives so much to corruption.
Okay.
And that is what we have always fought in the last 3 decades.
Let me get Mr. Ekujimi's final thoughts on this. States now have the responsibility, in this era to reach out to the people. How do we make this happen and make the governors accountable? In a minute. Mr. Ekujimi, are you there?
I think we can make the governors accountable if we are all alive to our responsibility. I'm here with you. We can make the governors accountable if we are all, responsible to our, duties as citizens. And it is not only the states. The local governments should be involved because the local governments are they are the closest tiers of government to the people. So the people themselves should be the watchdog, should be the, should be eternally vigilant to monitor this process. It's a fact that, the country tends to gain better, be the better for it with the removal of fuel subsidy. Like I said earlier on, you can see with the removal of fuel subsidy, the daily consumption of, PMS has reduced drastically. We have reports, we have seen videos of even our neighboring countries. We have seen the reports we get from, those avenues. So it tells you clearly that, the engagement we are talking about has already started with the states. We have seen the engagement with labor and even the private sector through the committee that was set up, before now. And now we have this engagement with the governors, with the 36 state governors. We just expect that as the days go by, with the level of, ignorance that is being, unleashed with regards to what fuel subsidy means, which is very clear to any discerning mind. If you don't want to be political, we believe that, Nigerians, will get a better understanding.
Trust me, we'll return to continue this conversation in the coming days, but I'm afraid we have to go now. Now we've had 52 days under this administration, and Nigerians can't wait to feel the real impact on their pockets, and, empower their purchasing, power at the markets. Gentlemen, thank you for your contribution. Olawale Okuni, Nelson Ekujimi, thank you for joining us on the program this evening. That's our program today. You can watch a repeat broadcast at midnight and at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I am Nifemi Oguntoye, and I'll be back at the top of the hour with more stories for you. Stay with us.